I want you to like close your eyes for a second and just imagine walking into this massive, newly built housing complex.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. So picture these gleaming, pristine towers reaching up into the sky. You walk through these beautifully landscaped gardens, you know, the kind you see in high-end real estate brochures.
Oh, yeah, the really glossy ones with the perfect lighting.
Exactly. And you step into this modern, polished elevator. You look out over huge paved parking lots. I mean, it is the absolute picture of modern urban development.
Right. Sounds idyllic.
It does, but as you stand there, you realize something is deeply, deeply wrong.
Wait, what do you mean?
There is absolute silence. I mean, no kids playing in the gardens, no cars in the parking lot.
Wow.
Yeah, no lights on in the windows at all. Almost no one lives there. It is just this completely silent, empty monument.
It's an incredibly eerie image, honestly. You're basically describing a physical space engineered entirely for human life, yet, completely devoid of it. It almost feels post-apocalyptic in a way, but the infrastructure is completely flawless.
Right, and the thing is, this isn't some dystopian thought experiment. It's actually a very real, increasingly visible phenomenon unfolding right now in India's housing market.
Yeah, it really is.
Industry insiders actually refer to them informally as ghost properties or ghost flats. So today we are taking a deep dive into this reality.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. We're pulling from this recent, really extensive reporting in the Times of India to, try and understand the mechanics behind these silent towers.
Right, because our mission here today is to unpack this glaring macroeconomic paradox.
Yeah, lay it out for us.
Well, you have thousands of completed, ready-to-live-in apartments just sitting locked up. But simultaneously, millions of people in those exact same cities are being priced out of shelter entirely.
The contradiction is just staggering.
It really is. I mean, when we look at the raw data from the reporting, the sheer scale of it forces a fundamental reevaluation of how modern urban growth is actually being incentivized.
How so?
Well, we're looking at a system where a supply and demand have been completely decoupled.
Right.
And for anyone navigating the current real estate market, whether you're trying to buy, rent, or, just understand the economic forces dictating the skyline of your own neighborhood, the mechanics driving these ghost flats are directly shaping the environment around you.
Absolutely. But let's start by defining the parameters of a ghost flat first, because, we are not talking about stalled construction sites here.
No, definitely not.
We aren't looking at those abandoned projects where the developer, ran out of money halfway through and just left a concrete shell.
Right. Far from it. A true ghost property is a fully completed residential unit.
Fully completed.
Exactly. The construction is finished, the utilities are connected, the paint is dry. And more importantly, these units are legally earned and totally available for possession.
Wow. So they're ready to go.
Yeah, they are fully functional dwellings that just remain unoccupied for years at a time. So the physical utility of the space is at 100%, but the actual utilization is at absolute zero.
Which brings us right back to that core paradox we mentioned. Because the Times of India reporting notes that Indian cities are facing a severe affordable housing crunch right now.
A massive one, yeah.
So we have this environment defined by a really high demand for shelter, paired with a massive supply of empty, viable shelter.
It doesn't make logical sense at first glance.
No, it doesn't. Honestly, it reminds me of the early days of the internet when people would buy up those prime domain names like pizza.com or something similar.
Domain squatting?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They never had any intention of building a website or running a business. They were just squatting on prime digital real estate, waiting for the asset value to go up so they could just sell it to the highest bidder.
Right.
The actual utility of the domain didn't matter at all, only its value as a tradable asset.
That is actually a really highly accurate parallel. What we're witnessing here is the extreme financialization of residential real estate.
Financialization.
Yeah. Historically, housing markets were primarily driven by demographic utility, population growth, migration patterns, basically the fundamental human need for shelter.
Sure. People need a place to live.
Exactly. But the capital markets have shifted entirely. Residential zoning is increasingly treated purely as a speculative asset class.
So the house isn't a house anymore.
Right. The physical structure of the home is just the underlying commodity for wealth storage, and capital appreciation. When a market prioritizes investors who are just seeking frictionless asset growth over citizens who actually need utility, the habitation of the building becomes, almost irrelevant to the transaction.
Okay, I have to jump in here and push back on the investor logic for a second, though.
Sure, go for it.
Because, I mean, even if I view a property purely as a financial instrument, $1 million asset should generate a yield, right?
On paper, yes.
If I own a finished apartment, the rational economic move is to put a tenant in it. I can collect rental income every single month while the property is just appreciating in the background.
Right. That's the traditional landlord model.
Exactly. So choosing to literally lock the door and walk away, it just feels like leaving serious money on the table. Why forfeit that cash flow?
Well, on paper, like you said, maximizing yield through rental income is the rational play. But the reality on the ground introduces so much friction that it completely disrupts that economic model.
Friction like what?
The Times of India reporting details several structural failures that make securing and managing a tenant incredibly difficult. And it really starts with what urban planners call amenity deserts.
Amenity deserts?
Yeah. These ghost properties are often situated in these newly developed zones that suffered from a total lack of basic civic infrastructure.
Oh, meaning the developer built the residential capacity, but literally nothing else.
Right. Imagine trying to market your high-end investment flat to a prospective tenant. The apartment itself is gorgeous, but the tenant quickly realizes there isn't a functioning school within, like, a 10-mile radius.
Oof, yeah, that's a deal breaker for families.
Exactly. And there are no grocery stores, no pharmacies, no local clinics. Employment hubs are hours away.
Right.
Furthermore, because you bought the property at a premium speculative price, you need to charge a premium rent to justify that yield you were talking about earlier.
Okay, so from the tenant's perspective, the math completely falls apart. I mean, why pay top-of-the-market rates to live in an isolated tower where just buying a carton of milk requires, like, a major logistical operation?
You wouldn't. And that isolation is tied directly to a massive infrastructure lag. It's a really critical structural issue in rapid urban expansion.
How so?
Well, the private developers have access to massive pools of pre-sale capital and private equity, right?
Right.
So they can acquire land on the periphery of a city and throw up these 30-story concrete towers in a matter of months.
Wow, that fast.
Very fast. But the surrounding civic infrastructure, the paved access roads, the municipal water lines, public transit networks, all of that is managed by local government bodies.
And local governments move at the speed of, well, municipal bonds and zoning approvals?
Exactly. Public tenders, red tape, all of it, which creates this fundamental pacing mismatch.
Right, because you have private money moving fast and public money moving slow.
Exactly. You have highly capitalized private equity operating at lightning speed, while the public works required to actually support those developments operate on a bureaucratic timeline that can lag like 5 to 10 years behind.
10 years.
Easily.
Yeah.
So the towers are finished, but the roads leading to them are quite literally dirt tracks. The municipal sewage lines might not have even reached the property line yet.
Okay, that makes the domain squatting approach make a whole lot more sense now.
Right.
Because if I'm an investor dealing with the friction of finding a tenant willing to live on a dirt road with no grocery stores, managing all their complaints, dealing with the wear and tear on the property, it's just simply not worth the marginal rental income.
Not at all.
It's economically easier for me to just leave it locked, absorb whatever the carrying costs are, and wait to flip it to the next speculator in 5 years when the roads finally get built.
The friction absolutely outweighs the yield. But, we also have to factor in that some of these flats are empty, not by the owner's choice, but due to severe bureaucratic gridlock.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, the reporting points out a significant number of properties are just trapped in legal limbo, specifically revolving around occupancy certificates.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that, because if the building is finished and I've literally paid for the deed, what is keeping me from just turning the key and moving my furniture in?
An occupancy certificate is it's the final non-negotiable regulatory sign-off from municipal authorities. It dictates that a building has been constructed according to the approved plans and is legally safe for human habitation.
Right, so basic safety stuff.
Exactly. This covers structural integrity checks, fire safety compliance, environmental clearances, proper integration with city utilities, all the crucial stuff.
So if a developer, say, cuts corners on fire suppression systems, or maybe violates the floor space index they were zoned for, the city just halts the certificate.
Yes, the municipality leverages the certificate to force compliance. But the collateral damage of that falls entirely on the buyer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have buyers who purchase these units not for speculation, but as their actual primary residence.
Like a family just wanting a home.
Right. They have paid their mortgages, they want to move in, but they are legally barred from crossing the threshold because the developer failed to meet regulatory obligations.
That is incredibly frustrating.
It is. The project gets stalled in court for years, so the door remains locked, adding yet another layer of empty units to the skyline.
So we really have a perfect storm here. We have speculators choosing to leave units empty because the infrastructure lag makes renting too frictional. And then we have legitimate homeowners who are just locked out by regulatory gridlock.
That's the perfect storm, exactly.
And the source material specifically focuses on residential projects in Noida and Greater Noida as prime examples of this phenomenon. Looking at those specific regions, the downstream effects on the local economy must just be devastating.
Devastating is the right word. It creates this cascade of economic failure. The reporting frames this around the concept of a wider ecosystem.
A wider ecosystem. What does that mean in this context?
Well, urban development isn't just a matter of increasing density or pouring concrete, right? A neighborhood only becomes economically viable when human beings actually inhabit it.
Right.
Because residents provide the economic velocity that sustains a microeconomy.
I see. Because a resident isn't just, occupying a floor plan. They are a node in a network of transactions. They buy coffee, they pay for transportation, they hire local services.
Exactly. Every single daily action of a resident supports that wider ecosystem. So when a massive housing complex is populated entirely by ghost flats, that critical economic velocity drops to zero.
Wow.
If you are an entrepreneur looking to open a grocery store or a pharmacy, you analyze foot traffic, right? You look at local demographics.
Of course.
But if the towers are empty, you don't open the store. And if there are no stores, the municipal transport authorities definitely won't bother routing bus lines to the area.
So it's a localized economic freeze, a massive chicken and egg scenario for urban planners.
Exactly.
Because you need the critical mass of residents to incentivize the commercial businesses and transport links to open. But, you need the commercial businesses and transport links to already be functional to convince residents to actually move in.
That's the exact trap. When real estate development is driven purely by speculative capital, it completely bypasses the organic human element required to ignite that localized economy.
Right.
The developers operated under this assumption that supply just creates its own demand, that simply constructing the units would organically spawn a neighborhood.
Which clearly isn't true.
No, it's not. A city requires a living, breathing network of human commerce to sustain itself. Without it, the area just remains this sterile grid.
It proves you really cannot mandate a functioning neighborhood into existence from the top down without aligning the incentives for the people who actually have to live there.
That's a great way to put it.
It's just a fascinating look at the fragility of urban economies. I mean, the concrete is durable, but the economic ecosystem is incredibly delicate.
Very delicate, yeah.
But, the most alarming takeaway from the Times of India reporting isn't just the situation in Noida or Greater Noida.
Right, it goes way beyond that.
The piece explicitly contextualizes this as a global phenomenon.
Yeah, the mechanisms we are discussing today, the speculative capital outpacing infrastructure, housing as a financialized asset, none of these are unique to India. This is a recognized global blueprint for how modern capital interacts with physical real estate. The reporting actually points to extreme examples in China, specifically citing the cities of Ordos and Zhengzhou.
And in those cases, we aren't just talking about a few quiet apartment blocks, right? We are talking about entire metropolitan areas built at a scale that just defies belief, but left virtually unoccupied for years.
Yeah, the Chinese examples are really the logical extreme of this model. In many of those regions, municipal governments relied heavily on land sales to developers just to fund their own operating budgets.
Oh, wow. So the incentive structure was totally skewed from the start?
Completely. This created a massive structural incentive to approve and build entire cities, totally regardless of underlying demographic demand.
Right.
The developers had access to cheap credit, the local governments needed the revenue, and the burgeoning middle class needed a place to park their savings in an economy with, frankly, pretty limited investment alternatives.
So millions of people bought apartments in cities they had no intention of ever living in, simply because physical property was viewed as the safest, most reliable store of wealth.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate manifestation of the concrete bank account.
The concrete bank account, exactly. And the pattern repeats across different economic systems, too. The article also draws parallels to the property boom in Spain prior to the 2008 financial crisis.
Right, the Spanish housing bubble.
Yeah. In Spain, an influx of cheap credit following their integration into the Eurozone, fueled a massive construction boom, particularly along the coast and on the outskirts of major cities.
And I'm guessing it was the same story.
Basically, yeah. Again, the construction was driven by speculative investment and easy capital, totally divorced from actual demographic realities or local housing needs.
It seems like whenever global capital markets reward the transaction over the habitation, this is just the inevitable result.
It really is.
It fundamentally changes the psychology of a society regarding what a building is actually for. Like, it stops being shelter and just becomes a tradable commodity, like a barrel of oil or a gold bar.
Precisely.
The fact that someone might want to actually sleep inside it becomes a secondary, almost inconvenient byproduct of the asset's true purpose.
And that psychological shift is incredibly difficult to reverse once it takes hold in a market.
I can imagine.
As long as global financial systems incentivize the hoarding of residential property as a wealth generation strategy, we will continue to see these ghost properties emerge. And they'll be completely indifferent to the localized crises of housing affordability unfolding right in their shadows.
Right.
Because the capital markets simply don't price in the social cost of an empty building.
Wow. So we've unpacked the mechanics driving this paradox today. We have speculative investing transforming residential zoning into frictionless asset classes. We have a fundamental mismatch between the speed of private equity building towers and the speed of municipal governments building the necessary roads and sewers. We have bureaucratic red tape trapping legitimate buyers in regulatory purgatory. And the result is this bizarre global reality where undeniable housing shortages exist shoulder to shoulder with gleaming empty apartment blocks.
It's a striking image.
It is. We are just hyper efficient at constructing the physical structures of cities, but failing completely to cultivate the human ecosystems that make them viable in the first place.
And the data really challenges us to demand more sophisticated metrics for urban development.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for decades, civic progress has been measured simply by the volume of units constructed, right? And the sheer amount of capital deployed.
Like, how many concrete boxes did we build this year?
Exactly. But we need to transition to measuring success by how effectively those units integrate into and sustain a living, functioning community.
That makes total sense.
A locked, empty tower is not a successful development, no matter how much its paper value increases.
Which leads to a final thought I want to leave you with today, building on this idea of the concrete bank account.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've been analyzing these buildings as financial instruments, but they are still physical structures, right? They are bound by the laws of physics and entropy.
Of course.
A building actually requires human habitation to survive. It needs the daily wear and tear. It needs the HVAC systems running, the plumbing flowing.
Oh, that's a really good point.
It needs the ambient heat of human bodies to prevent mold, condensation, and structural decay. When a 30-story tower is left totally empty and unmaintained for a decade, it naturally begins to rot from the inside out.
Yeah, the physical decay actually outpaces the financial appreciation. It's a massive blind spot in the speculative model.
Exactly. So are we, as a global society, expending staggering amounts of capital, labor, and finite environmental resources to build the world's most expensive temporary monuments to speculation?
That's a heavy thought.
If these buildings degrade structurally before the market ever corrects enough for people to actually move in, the entire endeavor isn't just a failure of urban planning, it's a colossal destruction of real wealth.
The physical reality will eventually catch up with the financial fiction.
It certainly makes you look at those silent, empty balconies on your commute in a completely different light.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the source material for today. We hope this exploration gives you a sharper lens to view the invisible macroeconomic forces shaping the streets and skylines around you. Keep questioning the world you walk through, and we'll see you next time.